Father Daniel Cross, 36, tightened a bolt, working overtime for his 7-year-old daughter Ella. Suddenly, the manager's shout echoed, "Cross! Front office now!" Inside the sterile meeting room, the famously ruthless CEO, Victoria Hale, 30, stood waiting. She slid a file across the table. "Daniel Cross, your employment is terminated. Immediately." Daniel was stunned. "But my daughter?" Victoria turned away, cold and composed. Daniel walked out, clutching his small box, past the sneering silence. His world went dark, unaware that the woman who fired him would save his Christmas Eve. The news of Daniel's termination spread like wildfire through the Aurora plant. The remaining staff, fearful of their own jobs, quickly turned against the victim. "Serves him right," they muttered in the break room. "Always acting like a saint. Guess management saw through his fake kindness." Daniel moved slowly, methodically, clearing out his locker. He heard every mocking whisper, every venomous comment, but he allowed none of it to show on his face. Dignity was all he had left, and he refused to let their spite take that too. His fear wasn't about the lost salary or the crushing debt. His only profound terror was the thought of Ella waking up on Christmas morning to an empty tree. He couldn't bear the thought of that small, bright face falling in disappointment. The snow fell thick and heavy, swirling under the streetlights as Daniel walked to pick up Ella from her after-school class. When she saw him, her face lit up, a small, perfect sunbeam in the cold. She ran, tackling him in a giant hug, pulling a crumpled paper from her backpack. It was a crayon drawing of them both, standing beside a crooked, glorious Christmas tree. "Look, Daddy," she chirped. "I made us." Daniel felt a sharp, twisting pain in his chest, a mix of pure love and searing inadequacy. He forced a smile, tucking the bad news deep inside. "Guess what, sweetie? Dad got a few days off starting now." Ella clapped her small hands, bouncing on the balls of her feet. "Really? That means we have so much more time to prepare for Christmas. We can bake cookies and sing carols." Her innocent joy was a beautiful, unbearable burden. That evening, Daniel made his way to the small, dimly lit corner store to buy the cheapest loaf of day-old bread. A radio, tinny and loud, played a news report. The voice announced Aurora's massive personnel reduction, speculating on the ruthlessness of the young CEO, Victoria Hale. "A hard-line decision-maker," the reporter called her, making sure no sentimentality interferes with the bottom line. Daniel closed his eyes, remembering Victoria's expression in the meeting room, that cold, emotionless mask. He had felt completely invisible, dismissed as a mere disposable number. Back in their tiny, cramped apartment, Daniel tried to make the evening feel festive, stringing a few old, flickering fairy lights around the window. Ella, perched on the edge of the sofa, suddenly reached into her small piggy bank. She poured out a handful of crinkled bills and loose change, exactly $9.42. She carried the treasure to him with a serious, important expression. "Here, Daddy," she instructed. "Use this money to buy my Christmas presents, okay? I don't need much. Just a hug will be fine." The act of selfless love shattered Daniel's carefully constructed composure. He grabbed his daughter, pulling her into a fierce, desperate embrace. He buried his face in her hair, sobbing silently, twisting his head slightly so she wouldn't see the hot, cleansing tears staining his cheeks. She shouldn't have to do this, he thought savagely. She shouldn't have to worry about $9. Ella, sensing his pain, but misunderstanding the source, pushed back gently and placed her warm, small hand on his cheek. She looked up at him with eyes full of unwavering belief. "Don't be sad, Dad," she said, her voice soft but absolute. "You are the kindest, best daddy in the whole wide world." Daniel held her tight, swallowing the shame and the panic. He looked at the meager $9 and made a silent, profound vow. No matter what, he would find a way. He would keep his promise to his daughter. He would make this Christmas perfect. He had to. The next 3 days were a relentless cycle of humiliation. Daniel went everywhere, from smaller mechanics to large industrial firms. The response was always the same. Interviewers would look at his glowing resume, then freeze when they saw the recent ugly stain, "Fired from Aurora." They didn't even ask why. "We're sorry, Mr. Cross. We can't afford to hire someone involved in a high-level dismissal. We don't want trouble." The former manager's lie, planted in his file, had become a permanent, toxic branding. He was not only unemployed, but unemployable. The job market was a door slammed shut in his face. He couldn't even find a temporary job to shovel snow. Daniel tried to maintain a facade of holiday cheer. He helped Ella tape paper snowflakes to the window, watching her happy, focused expression as she worked. Every snowflake she created, every giggle she let out, was a dagger twisting in his heart. Her pure, innocent expectation of joy only highlighted his catastrophic failure. He felt the weight of her trust crushing him. How can I tell her I couldn't even buy her a chocolate bar? On the evening of December 23rd, desperation drove Daniel back to the Aurora gates. He needed his old toolbox, the one with the custom-made wrench his late wife had gifted him. The security guard, a grim-faced man who once shared coffee with him, simply shook his head. "Orders from the top, Cross. Nothing leaves the property." Just as Daniel turned away in defeat, a sleek black luxury sedan, tinted windows gleaming, pulled up to the executive entrance. Victoria Hale stepped out. She looked immaculate, expensive, and devastatingly cold. She walked past him, her eyes fixed on the marble entrance, not even acknowledging his existence. But Ella, standing slightly behind Daniel, didn't see the ruthless CEO. She only saw a stunningly dressed woman under the dramatic security lights. Ella ran forward slightly, waving with all the innocence of a child. "Hello! You're beautiful, just like a princess in a movie." Victoria froze dead in her tracks. Her perfect stoic face registered a flicker of pure shock. In her world of corporate malice and backstabbing, no one ever complimented her without an agenda. Daniel rushed forward, mortified, pulling Ella back. "I am so sorry, Miss Hale. We didn't mean to disturb you." Victoria did not look at Daniel. She looked only at Ella, and for the first time her steel-hard gaze softened, just infinitesimally. A slight tilt to her head, a trace of curiosity in her eyes. She remained silent, then nodded once, a quick, jerky motion, and disappeared inside. Daniel dragged Ella home, his face burning with shame. That night, Victoria Hale, alone in her expansive, minimalist penthouse office, pulled up Daniel Cross's termination file. She couldn't shake the image of the little girl with the shining, trusting eyes. She looked at Daniel's resume again. 10 years of exceptional service. Then she scrolled down to the single damning entry: termination for negligence in the 2019 Aurora power failure. Victoria frowned, a deep furrow forming between her perfect eyebrows. This felt too simple, too clean. She cross-referenced the 2019 incident log herself. As she read the original report, her eyes widened in horror. It was Daniel Cross who had rushed into the overheating compartment, risking his life to shut down the flawed machine and preventing a fatal steam explosion that would have killed 17 men. He had taken no credit, simply stating he was doing his job. But the former production manager, the very man who had shouted at Daniel earlier, had buried the report and 3 years later used the incident as a scapegoat to cover his own department's abysmal failure during the recent cutbacks. Victoria's face went pale. Why was this file wrongly marked? Who signed off on this termination? She demanded into the intercom. Her nervous assistant finally told the truth. The former manager, sir. He used his access to submit a false termination report under your initial order to streamline. He blamed Cross to hide his own poor performance metrics. Victoria leaned back in her expensive leather chair, the shock hitting her like a physical blow. She realized the terrible, unforgivable truth. She had fired an innocent, heroic man, a father, just 4 days before Christmas. The guilt was instantaneous, profound, and consuming. Victoria whispered, the sound barely audible in the huge empty room. What have I done? It was Christmas Eve. The city square glittered with 100,000 festive lights. Aurora Corporation was hosting its extravagant annual Christmas party here, an ocean of champagne and corporate smugness. Daniel Cross was there too, but not as a guest. The only temporary job he had managed to secure was clearing the thick, freshly fallen snow around the edges of the brightly lit square. Bundled in a thin coat, Daniel silently pushed his shovel, feeling the biting cold and the burning shame. He avoided looking at the Aurora employees laughing inside the transparent party tent, but they noticed him. "Look at Cross," a loud voice snickered nearby. "The man who used to run the hydraulics department, now shoveling dirt. Perfect fit." Daniel kept his head down, working through the humiliation. Ella, dressed in a small, worn coat, sat huddled on a bench just outside the party zone. She was shivering, but her small face was set in determined adoration. She kept clapping her gloved hands together every time her father finished a row. "You're the strongest, Daddy," she shouted, her voice thin in the vast square. Then Daniel's former manager, the lying culprit, emerged from the tent, spotting Daniel immediately. He strode over, a glass of expensive wine in his hand, a look of malicious superiority fixed on his face. "Well, well, Daniel," the manager drawled, condescension dripping from every syllable. "This is much more your speed, isn't it? Much better than engineering." Daniel straightened up, his knuckles white against the wooden handle of the shovel. He fought the urge to explode for Ella's sake. Ella, seeing the mean man, immediately shrank behind her father's legs. Freeze moment. Just as Daniel opened his mouth, prepared to swallow the insult and retreat, the sharp, authoritative click of high heels cut through the noise. Victoria Hale was marching across the icy cobblestones, her black dress coat striking against the white snow. Her voice, usually reserved for board meetings, sliced through the festive chatter, raw and laced with pure, terrifying fury. "What did you just say to my employee?" The entire crowd, from the janitor to the junior executive, froze. Music seemed to stop. Victoria advanced directly on the former manager, her eyes, usually cold, now burning with a sudden, devastating clarity. She didn't hesitate. "You are fired," she stated, her voice icy. "Effective immediately. Gather your belongings and leave the premises." The manager stammered, spilling wine onto the snow. "But I followed protocol. I'm a loyal employee." Victoria's expression didn't waver. "You blamed an innocent man, destroyed his reputation, and then actively sabotaged his ability to find new work. I know everything," she said with deadly quiet. "The company knows everything. We are done here." Twist 1. The public vindication. Before the silence could fully settle, Victoria's chief assistant, a stern man named Mark, stepped forward, his voice amplified by a portable mic meant for the party announcements. "Attention, everyone," Mark announced to the stunned crowd. "The CEO's action today is to publicly restore the honor of engineer Daniel Cross, the man who, 3 years ago, single-handedly risked his life to save 17 employees during the critical Aurora power incident." The announcement hit the crowd like a thunderbolt. Daniel Cross, the snow shoveler, was a hero, a fact that had been actively concealed. Daniel looked down, his face burning with acute embarrassment from the public attention. Victoria gently placed a hand on his shoulder. Her voice was low, for his ears alone. "Don't be ashamed, Daniel. This is not about honor. This is my apology." Twist 2. The unexpected offer. Then Victoria stepped back, taking the microphone from Mark. She addressed the silent crowd, her voice strong and clear. "Aurora Corporation takes full responsibility for the wrongful termination of Daniel Cross and the subsequent smear of his professional record," she announced. Her next words were monumental. "Effective immediately, I'm offering Mr. Cross the position of Chief Safety Officer, reporting directly to me. A man who values life over profit is the only person I trust with the safety of my employees." Daniel stared at her, the shovel slipping from his hand. He was speechless. He couldn't comprehend this radical change, this sudden public redemption. Ella, understanding only the word job and Daddy is staying, let out a joyful, high-pitched shriek. "Dad! Christmas miracles are real!" The entire square erupted in laughter and applause. Victoria stood by them, looking at the two of them, the cold mask finally melting away. For the first time, she allowed herself a small, genuine smile. Following the dramatic scene, Victoria made another unexpected move. She didn't leave Daniel to his own devices. She invited them to the city's exclusive Christmas fun park. Ella was instantly given access to the Santa Village VIP area, a luxurious, velvet-roped section usually reserved only for the children of corporate directors and elite guests. Daniel felt deeply uncomfortable stepping across the velvet rope. He stopped Victoria, his voice low with protest. "Miss Hale, please. This is too much. We don't belong in a place like this." Victoria shook her head, her expression earnest. "My name is Victoria, and you are right. I cannot buy my way out of this mistake. I want to correct my mistake, Daniel. Not with money, but with genuine kindness." Before he could argue further, Ella, already energized by the lights and music, grabbed Victoria's hand and pulled her toward a giant, snow-covered slide. "Come on, Miss Victoria. Play in the snow with us." The sight was astounding. Employees who had known Victoria as the ice queen of the corporation, the woman who never broke character, stood slack-jawed, watching her toss snowballs and laugh as Ella buried her in a pile of powder. Victoria was completely transformed, her corporate armor shed. Her movements were awkward, but her laughter was authentic, echoing Ella's joy. Daniel stood a short distance away, watching the spectacle. He was witnessing a version of Victoria Hale that absolutely no one in the business world had ever seen. The girl who had been praised for her relentless, emotionless drive was, in fact, capable of profound, unguarded happiness. He watched as Victoria, initially stiff, began to loosen up. She threw a snowball. It missed Ella by 10 feet, but the resulting burst of laughter was worth more than any successful business deal. He realized her previous coldness wasn't malice, it was isolation. A defense mechanism built so high that she had accidentally hurt the very people she was trying to protect. Victoria turned, her cheeks flushed red from the cold and the exertion, her eyes sparkling. "What are you doing just standing there, Daniel? Join us!" Daniel felt the distance, the professional wall, and the enormous chasm of their social difference dissolve completely. He stepped onto the snow, and for the first time since his wife's death, he felt lightness. They built a clumsy, lopsided snowman together, the two of them working in tandem, guided by Ella's enthusiastic, demanding instructions. In the shared task, the weight of the last few days finally lifted from Daniel's shoulders. He was laughing, truly laughing, the sound ringing out over the cheerful chaos of the park. While Ella ran off to get a cup of hot cocoa, Victoria approached Daniel, her tone suddenly serious, intimate. She was no longer talking about the job. "That day, when I signed your termination, I didn't look you in the eyes. I didn't look at anyone," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper against the festive music, "because I was afraid. I was afraid that if I saw you, if I saw your pain, I would have to admit that I was wrong. I was afraid of being weak." Daniel looked at the CEO, who now seemed like a vulnerable, incredibly wealthy woman, confessing a deep personal flaw. His response was immediate and sincere. "Victoria, no one is perfect. We all make mistakes. What matters is that when you realize it, you try to fix it. That takes true strength." Victoria nodded slowly, kicking at a loose piece of ice. "My parents, they taught me that control equals success. Emotion was a liability. When I took over Aurora, I swore I wouldn't fail, wouldn't show any weakness. I built a fortress around myself, Daniel. I used rules and policies as walls, and I hurt you because you were just an unfortunate consequence of my need for that control." She paused, taking a shaky breath. "It took a 7-year-old girl calling me a princess to finally break through that facade." Victoria looked down at the snow, kicking at a loose piece of ice. Her voice trembled slightly, revealing a need deeper than professional redemption. "Maybe," she admitted, her voice even softer now. "Perhaps I want to fix more than just the job, Daniel. Maybe I want to fix my life." Daniel reached out hesitantly and placed his hand briefly on her forearm. "You already are, Victoria," he said quietly. "You're choosing to be here. That's the hard part." She looked at his hand on her sleeve, a long, searching look, and didn't pull away. It was a silent acknowledgement that their connection had crossed a permanent boundary. Later that night on Christmas Eve, Daniel and Ella prepared a simple, comforting dinner in their small, warm apartment. Roast chicken and mashed potatoes. The atmosphere was quiet, domestic, and utterly ordinary. The smell of roasting herbs and butter filled the air, a stark contrast to the sterile scent of corporate success Victoria was used to. The tiny room was packed with the clutter of a life lived fully, a stack of Ella's school books, mismatched ceramic mugs, and the aggressively cheerful paper chain Ella had made. A sudden, sharp rap came at the door. Daniel opened it to find Victoria Hale standing on the landing. She was wearing a simple wool coat now, not the power suit, and she held a large, beautifully wrapped gift box. "I know I shouldn't intrude," she began, her voice uncertain, her CEO confidence nowhere in sight. "But I came, if you'd allow me to join you." Ella let out a joyful squeal, rushing past her father. "You came! You came!" she cried, grabbing Victoria's hand and pulling her inside. Victoria stepped into the small apartment. The contrast to her own minimalist palace stark, yet the warmth here was overwhelming. The silence of her own life was replaced by the comforting sounds of two people who cared deeply for each other. She sat down at the small dining table between Daniel and Ella. For the first time in years, she felt a profound, aching sense of belonging. The warmth of the single father and his daughter was almost too much to bear. Daniel offered her a piece of the simple roasted chicken. "It's not executive dining," he joked gently. Victoria ate a bite, a look of profound peace settling on her face. "It's the best thing I've eaten all year," she said truthfully. "In my world, Christmas dinner is a catered event for 50 people I don't know, or a microwave meal eaten alone in my apartment while I review Q4 projections. I have never had a Christmas dinner with people who genuinely cared that I was there." Ella, finished with her meal, climbed onto Victoria's lap, resting her head against the CEO's shoulder. "Then stay with us this year, Miss Victoria," she asked, her voice innocent and absolute. Victoria looked over Ella's head at Daniel. Her eyes asked the question that her powerful, guarded personality couldn't allow her to speak. "Can I stay?" Daniel smiled, the answer clear and final. He nodded once, slowly. "Our door is always open to you, Victoria. Always." After dinner, Victoria insisted on handing over her large gift box. Daniel watched as Ella tore into the paper. It wasn't a tablet or a designer dress. It was a professional-grade art kit. Paints, canvases, and brushes far beyond what Daniel could have afforded. Ella gasped, her eyes wider than the Christmas lights outside. For Daniel, the gift was a new, beautifully carved wooden wrench, custom-made, better than the one his old manager had kept. It was a symbolic replacement for what was stolen, an acknowledgement of his true worth. Daniel realized this wasn't charity. This was respect, given person to person. Ella cheered, hugging Victoria tightly. "Yay! My Christmas is complete. Dad has a friend, and I have you." Victoria laughed, a genuine, tearful sound that seemed to be the release of a decade of loneliness. It was the laugh of someone who had finally found home. After the applause died down, a comfortable, profound silence settled over the room. It wasn't the silence of awkwardness, but the quiet of peace. Daniel watched Victoria, her face finally relaxed, tracing the outline of Ella's small hand on her shoulder. He realized he hadn't just gained a job back. He had gained a chance to fill the emotional voids left by years of grief and struggle. Victoria, too, felt the weight lifting. The polished, empty marble of her penthouse felt a million miles away. This small, cluttered apartment, smelling of rosemary and wood, was rich with something her wealth could never purchase: presents. The three of them spent the next hour hanging the final decorations on the small, humble Christmas tree. As they worked, the conversation flowed easily, sharing simple stories about Daniel's late wife, Sarah, and Victoria's quiet, demanding childhood. Daniel shared a story about how his wife, Sarah, always insisted on putting up the crooked, homemade star first. Victoria listened intently, not with the CEO's ear for information, but with the quiet sympathy of a friend. She, in turn, confessed how Christmas had always felt like a mandatory performance in her youth, complete with rehearsed thank yous and cold, expensive gifts. The contrast was palpable, yet it bound them together. Two people who had experienced profound forms of isolation, one through grief, one through power, now finding solace in the simplest shared tradition. There were no more titles, no distance. Just three people building a holiday. Victoria reaching up high to place the final, slightly battered star on the topmost branch, whispered, her voice husky with emotion. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for letting me stay, in a way no one ever has. Daniel stepped closer, lifting his hand to steady hers on the star. Their eyes met, and in that silent, understanding gaze, the future was written, a future where the single dad found a new partner and the Ice Queen found a family. They weren't just fixing a mistake, they were forging a foundation. This quiet, imperfect Christmas Eve was the real beginning of their chosen family. The CEO, the single dad, and the little girl stood together, united by the miracle of a corrected mistake and a chosen family. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, a story about how a single act of courage can change a life, and how home can finally be found where you least expect it, leave a comment and subscribe to NL Touching Stories.